Hey everyone, this video we're going to continue looking at how we can take what we might consider a real world item and turn it into a representation using binary. In this particular case, we're going to look at how we can encode an image, so a picture, into a binary stream, so a stream of ones and zeros. We're going to start with a simplistic view in today's worksheet, and hopefully we'll get time to expand on this and add some extra features. Now, while you guys might not have been around, back in the old days, TVs and videos and so forth were only in black and white. And that's what we're going to go back to today, where the only colors that our screen could show were black and white. And that's going to make it a little bit easier for us to represent our binary. Because what we're going to do is we're going to represent each pixel of our screen with either a white square, and we'll represent that with a 0, meaning that the screen is not turned on, and we'll represent all the black parts, the ones we would like to see, with a 1, meaning that we've turned the pixel on. Now, I've used the term pixel a few times, and some of you might know what that is and some might not. Basically, TV screens, video screens, and so forth, we see them as a picture, but in fact, they're actually individual little lights that we call pixels, and they can be turned on or off according to what the computer or the screen needs, and that's how we see an image. So what I'll do is I'll insert a little picture here of what pixels on a TV screen look like. So what you can see in this particular image is that each of the areas that we would normally see as a picture on the screen is actually made up of 3 different colors: red, green, and blue. Now, some of you might have heard the term RGB before, which actually stands for red, green, blue. And these are the 3 colors that essentially all digital screens use to make up the rest of their colors. We're not going to delve into that today, so don't stress too much, but it's important to understand that what we see on a screen is actually made up of pixels, things that can be turned on or off. So again, our example today, we're going to just start with basic black and white. A pixel's on, which will show black in this case, or a pixel is off if we have nothing on our screen. Okay, ones and zeros. So here is the worksheet. Now I'm going to do a combination worksheet and explanation at the same time today. So there's only one video in this particular example. So this worksheet, it goes through a little bit about what encoding images in binary is, but really we're going to focus on this example here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to zoom this in now so that we can see this a little bit more closely. So here is our example. What we have is an 8 by 8 grid. Now, if we think about it, we've just previously learned when we have 8 individual bits of information, we call that a byte. And here we have 8 bits of information going across. So we could say that each line of this picture is going to be represented by 1 byte. So we have a bit, a bit, and so on. And we have 8 of them across, so we're going to call this an 8-bit image. We've also gone down by 8 bits as well, or 8 bytes in total. So we can represent this whole picture here by 8 individual bytes, 1 for each row of this picture. Okay? So each of these individual squares is going to represent 1 bit, and we're going to say whether this particular square right here is either on or off. 0 is off and 1 is on. Again, in this case, we're saying the black is the on. So what we have is a comparison to this square over here where we're showing the binary. So if we look at the very first top left-hand square, or we'll call it a bit, right, or a pixel, it is white, therefore it is off. And so if we look at the corresponding square over here, it is a 0 because we want that pixel to be off. If we look at the next one across and then look at its corresponding, it is also 0. Then we get to the third one across, and that is now black because we'd like it to be turned on. So now we look across to the third one and we've got a 1 in that position, which tells the computer to turn that pixel on so we see the black square. And we keep going across. We've got another one on, another one on, another one on, and then 2 more off. And so that byte of information, 00111100, represents that top row of pixels and how we need to turn them off or on accordingly. Now in the sample here, I've colored all the ones in with red just to show a little bit more that the same shape is there as this circle that we drew with our pixels. So I've just sort of tried to help represent that by using red for my font over here. You don't have to do that, but it does help to see that you're not making any mistakes. And I can quite clearly see that that same shape is still there. So the second row here, the second row of a byte, represents the second row of this picture, and so forth. And that is how we can represent a black and white image, an 8 by 8 pixel, right, or 1 byte by 8 bytes. We can represent this image as bits of information in binary. Now, once we've got our binary written out here, we're going to write it into the box provided at the bottom. And the first byte of information on our left-hand side here will be our first row. We'll make sure we put a space in between, and we'll do a second byte of information, which will be our second row. And our third row, fourth row, fifth row, sixth row, seventh, and eighth. So we have 8 bytes of binary down here, which will represent from top to bottom the 8 bytes of binary that make up this image. Now it's very, very important that you don't leave any of the zeros out, especially these ones at the start of a byte. In some cases before, people have left them out, and that will completely change the image that you get if one comes up at all. Because if you don't have exactly the right number of bits or bytes, then you won't get an image show up at all, or you'll get a partially missing image. So it's very, very important that we don't leave any preceding zeros out. Okay? So that's what we're trying to achieve. We're representing the pixels with binary on or off, zeros and ones, and then we're going to put them into a single string. And in fact, I will be copying this string out of your worksheet when you submit it into a special little program, and that will give me the image that it represents. So I'll be able to see from your picture that you draw whether your binary in fact does the same thing. I don't actually have to sit there and work out what the ones and zeros are. I load your numbers in, and that will show me the same picture or a different picture. And if I obviously get a different picture, then I know you've made some mistakes with your ones and zeros. Let's now have a look at the actual working example. So on the second page of the document, you had space for 2 images to be drawn. Okay. Now normally I'd get you to do this on paper, but in this case, you can do it straight into the Word document anyway, so that you can submit it online on Schoolbox. So the first thing I want you to do is to decide what it is that you're going to draw. We're not just drawing random patterns necessarily. Try and represent something. It's going to be tricky because you've got a very limited amount of space and a very limited amount of definition to show things. Okay, I'm going to draw a smile, and I might just get rid of a few extra spaces just for neatness. So I've written down what my image is supposed to be. Now, how I'm going to go about doing this is I'm just going to fill in the squares of this grid. This is just a table in Word, but I'm going to fill in the squares with black where I want it to be turned on. I'm going to leave them clear or white for the spaces I want to leave off. Now, I'm going to start by drawing a circle, just like in the top picture. The way that you fill in a square, okay, is just in your home menu. You should be able to find the paint bucket sort of tool for shading. And if I just choose black, in this case, it will shade that square in black. If I go to the next one, for example, and if I wanted that to be black as well, and I just now have to click on it, it'll change to black. If I've made a mistake and I want this one now to be clear, I do have to change the color first, and I'm just going to go with no color, and it will change. And the same if I want this one now to be clear, I'm just going to click on it, and it still says clear up here, so I'm going to click on that to clear it. So the easiest thing is just to change to black to begin with and go around where you want, but if you make a mistake, you need to know how to clear it, which is change the color first and clear it. So I'm going to start with a circle, and I remember from the previous example that it was 2 spaces that were cleared, then we had some colored in ones, right? So I'm going to start by making this third one across black, and then this one here, this one here, and this one here. And then I know it came down in a bit of a curve like that, and then it repeated over on this side. So I'm just choosing spaces, and then I know it came down this way. We basically want to repeat the same at the bottom down here, going around. Now this would normally be easier on paper, but again, we need to submit this online, so we'll continue to do this into the Word document. So here is my circle, or the outside of my face if I like. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to choose to put an eye there and an eye there, and I'm going to try and do a smile. So this could get a bit messy because it's very hard to get a smile in here. Okay, that's kind of worked. What I might want to do is expand this circle out a little bit so I have a bit more space. So what I might do is I'm going to make changes to this. I'm going to make it a little bit better. I won't make you sit here and watch it all. I'll just put this into fast forward. But basically I'm going to just clean this up a bit and make it a little bit better. Okay, we're back, and this time what I've done is I've actually made a bit more of a square shape so I could get a bit more of a smile actually coming in. So I'm a bit happier with that example. So now that I've drawn my picture and I'm happy with how it's come out, I now need to work out my binary on this side. So the first space in the top left is a white square. So I'm going to start by putting a 0 in the same corresponding square on the next grid. The next one is a filled in black square. So that's going to be represented by a 1. And in fact, the next ones all across are all going to be 1s because each of those squares is black until I get to the last one. So it's very quick and easy for me just to put the 1s in, and then the last one will be a 0. If I now look at my second line, I have a filled in space in the first one and in the last space, but everything else is a 0. So I'm going to put a 1 here, I'm going to put a 0 in all the other spaces until I get to the last one and put a 1. If I then look at my third line, I have a 1, then I have a 0 because I have an empty space, then I have a 1 for the eye, 2 zeros between the eyes, a 1, a 0, and a 1. So I'm starting to build up this picture. Again, I'm going to fast forward and do the rest of it. You can obviously follow along, and then we'll talk about coloring them. Okay, I've completed my 1s and 0s. But like in the example, it might help to color in the 1s, for example, with red or something else to help it stand out, just to see that we have got all of the 1s where we want them. So simple thing, I'm just going to highlight my 1s and I'm just going to change the font color. So up here in the font color, I'm going to choose red because it stands out nicely. I'm just going to do that everywhere that I've got a 1. So although we've been going across to represent our bytes, for just formatting sake right now, I can see all these 1s going down the side, so I'm going to highlight down that way. And again, I can just click on that color now that I've done it. I'll do the same over here. So I don't have to necessarily go in byte order at the moment just to highlight, but I'm just trying to find everywhere that I've got a 1, and I'm just highlighting those and turning those red. So pretty quick, pretty easy. You could do it as you go along. It's just a lot more clicking as you type each thing out. And you don't even technically have to do this, but I do think it helps to get a visual representation that things look right. So here I can see I have my 1s, they look right. That sort of gives me my square around the outside. Here are my eyes, and here's my mouth. So I feel like I've got that pretty right. Okay, the last stage that we need to do for this example is to type the binary out into this spare text box at the moment. So I'm just looking for my first byte of binary at 0, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 0. I'm going to put a space. Second line, 1, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 1. So that's 8 bits making up a byte. Put a space, and I'll keep going. Again, I'm not going to make you watch this at normal speed, so I'll just finish these off. Okay, here is my binary all typed out. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 bytes. Each one has the 8 bits, so that's correct. And so that number string here should represent this. Now, for those of you paying close attention, you might have realized I'd made a mistake, and it was a genuine mistake. Over here on this line, I've actually typed a 0 when it should be a 1. I highlighted it when I was doing my red and everything, but I still managed to put the wrong value. So let's quickly change that to a 1 because it should be filled in. And we want to make sure that we've got the right binary down here. So line 1, 2, 3, 4. It was on line 5 or byte 5. So byte 1, byte 2, byte 3, byte 4, byte 5. So I had 101001000. Now I typed out here what was correct when I did it, but it should be a 1 on the end. So I am going to go here and fix this up, because otherwise I would have had this square here. If I go back to my original picture, this square here would have ended up being white because I would have had a 0 there because I had a 0 here, and it would have broken my picture. So it is very important that you're checking as you go along. That was an honest, genuine mistake on my behalf, but it goes to show that it is quite easy to do. So that would be how you do this particular task. Draw a picture in the space provided. It has to be only black or white. You can't put any grays or colors or in, so you're really, really limited. Work out your ones and zeros, and then turn that into byte information down in the bottom. You have space to do 2 of these, so this would be a whole second image. So decide what you want to draw it up in black and white, work out your ones and zeros, and then give me a string down the bottom. Okay? You technically only need to submit the second page here, but it's easier just to submit the whole document. And you can see on this page, you've got space for your name, class, and student number, so please make sure you do fill them in. Again, the first page was just the example. Read through it again if you need to. But while I don't care if you submit it, you can just delete that if you want to. It's really only page 2 that is critical. While I would prefer you didn't all go into a smile like mine, there's nothing to stop you doing something a bit different. But do try and be original and be a little bit creative. There is limited space, as I've already mentioned. It is very difficult to draw anything of a complex type. But what I don't want you to do is just do the most basic thing. I don't want just like see a square. That's pretty boring. See if you can do an interesting sort of picture from what you've got. Surprise me with your creativity in binary. So have a go. As always, get in contact if you're having trouble, and please make sure you submit on Schoolbox by the due date.